Howdy. Welcome to May's MasterCast. I'm your host, Ben Wiggins, and as you might imagine, it is a beautiful day in Aggie land. We have a great friend of the show returning today, and we're excited for the discussion. Dr. Eli Jones is a professor of marketing, Lowry and Peggy May's eminent scholar, and the former dean of May's Business School at his alma mater, Texas A&M University. He served as the dean of 3 flagship business schools over 13 years. He has published sales and sales management research in top academic journals and is a co-author of 2 professional books, Selling ASAP and Strategic Sales Leadership, Breakthrough Thinking for Breakthrough Results. He just finished writing his new book, Run Toward Your Goliaths, a book about his and his wife's faith journey in the presence of immense adversity. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. We welcome Eli Jones to the show. Thanks for taking the time to join us again.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for the invitation. It's always fun to be around you, Ben.
It's always our pleasure to have you and a pleasure to be around you from a personal perspective as well. We're here to talk about your latest in a series of projects. You've written a book called Run Toward Your Goliaths, and you have a podcast supporting that called Victory Grew, which I thought was a great name.
Yeah, I couldn't believe people hadn't gotten that name.
You were able to get it.
Man, I was waiting for us.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the book and about the show.
Yeah. So Run Toward Your Goliaths, it's based on David and Goliath.
Yes.
Right. And I'll share with you kind of the background, how I got there. But when you think about it, people throughout their lives, we have these various giants that come along, right? And so obviously we're using a metaphor, but we face these giants, and those giants are pretty big. In fact, they kind of grow as you go through life, right? And so I was led to start this project, and I'll give you the background here. My wife lost her mother when her mother was 51. And my mother-in-law, get it right, my mother-in-law actually left behind a diary. And so when our kids come around, Fern will actually read the diary to them. Now, our kids hardly remember their grandmother, but I remember watching Fern and our kids as they read the diary, and it's as if their grandmother is speaking to them. So that was the germ of the idea, the genesis of it. And so what I ended up doing is I watched that and I said, one day I'm going to write a book to my family. In fact, I wanted Fern to co-author with me and write a book to our family for our grandkids and our great-grandkids to come.
Okay.
All right. Because it's so impactful. So it's a legacy piece in the first place. Well, in July of 2019, I lost my eldest daughter.
Yeah.
And that became urgent. Writing this book became very urgent. And what's interesting, Ben, is originally it was just for our family, our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids to come. But as I was writing it, I shared draft chapters with a few friends and some family members. And they said, you know what, there's so much in here, right, that others could benefit too. And so that is how we started. My wife and I, started this Run Toward Your Goliaths project. She's involved too. So as you know, she loves to write music.
Yes.
And so I included her music lyrics in the book too, just to punctuate some of the points I was making in the book.
I've noticed that, and I appreciated that in the 5 smooth stones sections of the chapters as well. What we're going to do for today's show is we're going to steal some format from Victory Grew, the podcast you've been doing to raise awareness and of this giants motif, which I think is a great way of thinking about challenges as we go through life. But my first question for you is, what is the biggest giant you've faced? You alluded to a pretty big one a moment ago.
Yeah. So, my wife and I have been married, it'll soon be 39 years. And I was a senior here at A&M. And that's when we met. And also the biggest one at the beginning of our marriage was poverty.
Yeah.
We lived in one little bedroom of a 3-bedroom mobile home.
Yeah.
We lived next to a store. So I was in broadcasting. I think you know that. I was in broadcasting. And I was commuting in the last part of my junior year and all of my senior year. I was commuting to Houston, working at a station, Magic 102.
Right.
And I was doing that. And that's when I met my wife.
Right.
All right. We got married. What was interesting, Ben, is in my senior semester, I graduated fall of 82.
Yeah.
That summer, I was going into my last semester, and the station manager and the sales manager offered me a full-time job to be a program director, which was probably a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Really over all of the programming at the station.
Yeah.
And that was in Detroit. And back then, we didn't have online learning, right? And I'm a first gen. And so it was really important for me to finish college. And so when they offered me this job in August of 82, knowing that I would finish in the fall, December of 82, I turned it down. And it was tough. I go back and I think about it now, but that was a big decision because I could have gone for the money.
Yeah.
I could have gone for the position, which was an awesome position. And Detroit at that time was a pretty good place to be when it came to music, right?
Yeah.
Now I love music, you know that.
Sure.
But at any rate, I turned it down. And when I finished A&M in December of 82, I went back to the station manager and said, got my degree, I'm done. And I'll never forget this. He said, congratulations, we don't have a job for you. Now in 82 in Houston, that was one of the bust times. We have boom and bust in Houston, largely based on the energy business and so on. And so it was a tough time. But Fern and I got married. And so we moved back to the Bryan area, and I worked for my dad in this little convenience store. Yeah, right there on Leonard Road. It's now Sunrise Food Mart. It used to be Jones Food Mart. Okay. Back in the day. Yeah, and so I worked for him, and we were poor. I had no savings. All right, we got pregnant again, so I had no health insurance. I was working for my dad, and I'll never forget this. I went to him. We had another child on the way, and I said, Dad, I need to get a second job so that I could have health insurance for my family. Yeah. And it was a turning point. I put it in the book. It was a turning point. It was really a time when, as I look at it, it was a defining moment. It really was. And I had a choice. I had another decision to make. And my decision wasn't really the best decision. I was still growing. But I walked away. And love my dad. He's, as you can read in the book, I love my dad. But it was a point at which I had to really reflect. And that is, it's important for me to really strike out on my own. Yeah. Right. Okay. I had the family in tow. I was working for my dad. He's deceased, but he was a serial entrepreneur. Yeah. I grew up around entrepreneurship. I think like an entrepreneur. I just became an academic entrepreneur. But at any rate, that defining moment was really, really critical. And the other thing, Ben, is when we struck out, I stopped by the Eagle newspaper. I'll never forget this. I have a journalism degree, undergrad. And so I left my resume at the Eagle newspaper, not knowing what was going to go on. Now, we didn't have cell phones back then either. So I left the number to the grocery store, the convenience store where my parents were. And I remember Fern and I and the kids, we actually drove to her parents' home. Okay. And we were spending the night there. My mom called and she said, baby, the Eagle called and they want to talk to you. I was like, I'm on my way. Yeah. So I drove back. I left Fern and the kids there and I drove back. And I took a job at the Eagle newspaper. Now, this is the most amazing thing to me. And I kind of talk about God winks, God moments, right? But the most amazing thing is I managed to start at the Eagle, and I was there long enough for the health insurance to kick in. And my youngest child was born, and we had health insurance. But poverty was a big giant for us then. Yeah. And we managed to leave the 1 bedroom of a 3-bedroom mobile home. And then the other thing that happened too was I decided I wanted to get some more business experience, business education. Sure. I grew up around business. I just loved to write and I loved broadcasting. So I was moving in that direction, but clearly I needed some business, right? Formal business education. Of course, I got a lot of informal business education being around my parents who were serial entrepreneurs. Right. So this is one of the things that I talk about in the book too. Along the way on this journey, and you're facing these giants, you've got to be mindful because God is going to send you people at these critical junctures, these crossroads. And the one that met me right when I was trying to make a decision was someone I adore. He's deceased, but he was right here in the business school. He was the MBA director. His name was Dan Robertson. Dr. Dan.
Okay.
And so I remember not knowing anything about the GMAT, not knowing anything about getting an MBA. I walked in and I just had a conversation with Dr. Dan, and he was right there at that moment and gave me so much guidance. He told me how challenging it was going to be going through the MBA program with the family, supporting a family. He told me just about the workload and take that undergraduate education. I'll never forget this. He said, multiply that by 7. I don't know. And that's about what the workload is going to be. But I managed to go through it. And that one changed my whole trajectory. When I finished, I joined Quaker Oats and then Nabisco and then Frito-Lay. But those were some real defining moments. And so the summary in all of this is we went through that first challenge. That was a big one for us, for my entire family. It matured me in a very significant way. Yeah. And I realized I needed to do something else, and I needed to educate myself more if I wanted to continue to do well in my career. That's what I did. That was a turning point.
I think that something that often gets overlooked as people talk about things that can approximate trauma in our lives. We talk about, I think just now moving is starting to be recognized as something that can be a traumatic experience. But just the act of getting started in our professional lives, that can be extraordinarily difficult. And as you mentioned, you've dealt with a lot of big stuff, but the prospect of getting started, especially with a young family in a professional life, it can just be super difficult.
And that, the good news is we pulled out of it, and as we went through our marriage and our careers, there were others. The most recent is the one that I talked about at the very beginning. I mean, when you look at death of a loved one, there are 2. I mean, all of these are hard, but there are 2 at the very top. Death of a spouse and death of a child. And so this was really therapeutic for me. So I took some administrative time away and I took a leave between January and June, and I started the project. And again, it was really geared toward my family. And I just started writing, and I started sharing the chapters with my sister and my wife, and I started getting input, and I just kept writing. And for me, it was cathartic. It really was. Because in order to write the book, I had to go back and revisit those challenging times. Right. And I had to really punch through that. There were times when I broke down as I was writing it. I would stop, I would tear up, and then I would go through it. And so the premise, if you look at the book, it really is, and I have a circle that I put in there, and that circle is not a perfect circle. Life is not linear. We know that.
Right.
All right. And so this particular image that I selected to put in the very beginning of the book is twisted. It's turned, it's a full circle, but it's not a circle that you would.
It kind of goes off in different directions and loops over itself.
Yeah. And I use that image to say, hey, that's kind of what life is all about. We're going to have some twists and turns. We're going to have some surprises. We're going to have some sharp turns. We have to expect that, right? And we have to prepare for those things. And I think what's important here is, we're in an environment, we have undergraduates and graduate students. And I love being around students. I got into this profession because I love to teach and I love to write. And so when I think about it, there are times when I'll talk to someone and I'll hear their perspective on something. And it's just a matter of their needing to mature some because it's a bit idealistic, right? When you think about it.
Okay.
It's a bit idealistic how some at a certain age will think that their life is going to turn out. And I, not that I want to, discourage them in any way, but I think it's important for us to really paint a real picture for people, not sugarcoat everything, right? I think that's really important, especially today, right? And so when I have the privilege of speaking to someone, a young professional, and I always ask, what are your goals? What are you wanting to accomplish? And I'll listen to them. I'll take that moment because just as Dr. Dan was there for me, it's important for me to pass that on notice what I said. Dr. Dan didn't say, hey, this is going to be a piece of cake.
No.
That GMAT, it's going to be so easy.
He would have been lying to you.
Yeah. The workload, you can make it work. But he said, take that undergraduate workload and multiply it by 7. That stuck with me. That was a long time ago, Ben, but it stuck with me. He gave me a more realistic picture of how challenging that was going to be. And so therefore, I set the right expectations. When that challenge came, I wasn't surprised. And I wanted to let my children, I have adult children, and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren to come to know that it's not going to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be some twists and turns. You have to set the right expectations. That's the key.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to encourage people to run toward those things, right? You'll go back to David. David was a teenager when he took on this giant.
Mm-hmm.
What does it take to do that? And that's what I talk about in there. It takes a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot to say, I'm going to run toward that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Run Toward Your Goliaths is about. Run toward those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I say in there. What I've noticed, and I'm an N of 1, but what I've noticed is when you take that on, you don't run away from it. When you take that on, God's going to send you someone. Be aware.
You're Samuel, as it were.
Stay alert. Yeah. And that person, is going to help you out. You just have to stay alert. Too many people pass it up. They miss those opportunities. All right. One of the chapters I have in there is the drum beat of life. Now, I love to play drums, right? So I love to play the drums. And I talk about timing is everything. And drumming is timing, right? It's all about timing. And I believe that we kind of have a drum beat in our life, right? Our lives, each of us. And it's our own little drum beat. And it's constantly going in the background. And there are times when you're given an opportunity and that opportunity was right there on that beat.
Right. Okay.
But sometimes we miss the beat.
Yeah. Yeah. I miss the beat a lot.
It happens. Yeah.
But
it happens.
Tell us a little bit about Victory Groove, the show that you've developed in conjunction with the book.
Yeah. So I was thinking of a podcast as another way to get the message out. And I know you guys have done podcasting forever, podcast architects. You guys are wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really are. You're great. And I'm so happy to be working with you on this project.
We appreciate the opportunity.
I really do. I really do appreciate you. But I was thinking about, in this world of podcasting, what would be the most meaningful thing? Because as you well know, there's so many podcasts out there. It's cluttered. The market is cluttered.
Yeah.
All right. I don't care about the clutter. What I care about is the message.
Yeah.
The message is meaningful,
mm-hmm.
right? And so in the spirit of you're going to have challenges,
mm-hmm.
all right? These things are going to be, quote unquote, giants.
Yeah.
These things are going to be big. You have to have the courage, the faith, the boldness to run toward those things, right? I started thinking about, what if I could find other people who have faced major adversities, but they use that energy for something that's really productive,
mm-hmm.
right? I bet you know some people when they're faced with something that's really significant, a significant, giant adversity. Some people will stop. Some people will quit. They'll think that's it. It's over. My life is over.
Yeah.
I'm looking for those people who realize that your life is not over.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You got to continue to walk by faith. You got to continue going and look for those people who are going to come your way and help. And the people I'm interviewing right now are people who have faced significant adversities. And I'm watching what people do with that energy. What do you do with that? So when you lose a loved one, there's energy that's produced there. I mean, you're crying, you're going through the grieving process. There's energy that's produced. All right. Where do you put that energy? Are you going to mope around? Right? Are you going to do something productive? And so far, every person we've interviewed, every person has taken that energy and put it into something that's going to help others. Now, that's powerful. That's powerful. They put the energy into something that's going to help others.
Right.
They're kind of giving out of their own need in a way.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it, I mean, you're working with me on it. You've met the same people I've met.
Sure.
I mean, you've interviewed Henry Talamantes right here on MasterCast.
Yes, that's right.
And his story, how he was diagnosed, as you well know, you introduced him to me, pediatric cancer at 2 years old.
Yeah.
And what I love about that story is he could have spent his entire life saying, I could go any day now. It's over.
Yeah.
But what I love about that is he put that energy. And you remember his story. His story was, I don't take time for granted.
Right.
I don't take time for granted. And I think about him, he's a serial entrepreneur,
Yes.
He's birthing life. He's birthing businesses and employing people, right, out of his need.
Yeah.
He's being productive with that energy. And that's what Victory Groove is about, right? If you're a believer, we already have the victory. We just need to get our groove back.
Well put. You talked about the emotional difficulty of writing this in the process of processing the death of your daughter.
Yeah.
Describe the emotions that you felt as a parent. I can't fathom that kind of loss.
Yeah. So, fortunately and unfortunately, I'm part of a club.
Yeah.
And there are other people in that club.
Yeah.
And so I've had a chance, even right here in Mays. I remember when the word got out, true story. I was the dean and people started showing up in the dean's office. And I didn't even know. Some of them, I had no idea that they had lost a child, but they showed up in the office and they surrounded me. And we got in a big circle. And we said, wait a minute, we're part of a club. It's a club that no one wants to belong to.
Yeah.
But we're in there. So that support is important in helping to cope with it.
Yeah.
But the first, in our case, it was a shock. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was a routine medical procedure. And I was there with her when she, finished the surgery. I was there. I took her home. And she was home for 10 days. And then the next thing I know, she was in a coma. She left behind 3 children.
Yeah.
And so one of them is living with us, our grandson, our oldest grandson. And he's an Aggie. He's a freshman. He lost his mother in his junior year of high school.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing our daughter in him every day. She persevered. And I'm watching him persevere. I'm watching him take on that giant. You're talking about the giant for me, which is the father, the loss of a daughter from a father's perspective, the loss of a mother from his perspective. And so I had to tell him a few things. One, my dad lost his mother at a very early age.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What did he do with that? Kind of like Henry Talamantes. He became a serial entrepreneur. It was interesting. Lowry Mays called me when he heard the story. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
He called me, such a caring man. And he said, I want to speak to your grandchildren. And they were there. And so I handed them the phone. All right. And first they're like, what are you doing, Papa? I said, speak to this man. You'll understand later on. Lowry Mays took the time to tell my grandkids he remembered when he lost a parent. And I was watching the grandkids' faces as Lowry Mays, such a caring man who called me, talking to my grandchildren, and he was encouraging them. And he was telling them, you can keep going forward. Mm-hmm. Now, do we need to talk about the success of Lowry Mays? I don't think so. Let's look around.
Right.
He lost a parent at an early age. Right. And there are others who have lost loved ones. Even, I don't know, last week I got a notice of people who have lost someone dear to them, a sister, a mom. It happens as part of life, right? Mm-hmm. I know people who have lost loved ones and stopped. It's like that. It's all over now. Mm. We've got to get back up. We have to get back up, and we've got to push through that. It hurts. push through it. The blessing, and I'm thinking about this. Remember that circle? In that circle, there are dark moments, right? When you get the book and you see it, there are dark moments. Yeah. And my story that I'm telling is you're going to go through some dark moments. Yeah. But if you keep moving forward, you'll notice that you'll come right back into the light. Yeah. The light for me is watching my grandson succeed. Straight A's so far. Wow. As a freshman here at A&M. I see his joy. He's getting involved in a lot of organizations. He wants to be a leader of one of those organizations. Yeah. That's my daughter's son, and I get to see him every day. And that's powerful. That's the light that came out of that darkness.
Amazing. Tell us about how your faith helped you in the process.
Oh, it's critical. For me, it's critical. In fact, there are others here in the business school, and we meet regularly. And one of the members of this organization actually came to my office. She just lost a sister. All right, and we were talking about it just last week, and she said, and I believe it, I can't imagine not being a person of faith. What do you do when you face these things and you don't have that? Now, I know there are people that have probably listened to this podcast who may or may not be in that spot. They may not be in that place. They may not be a quote unquote believer. Mm-hmm. All right. All I'm saying is, I don't know how you would do it. I can tell you that being a person of faith, it helps me because of my beliefs. I believe that my daughter is in a better place. Mm-hmm. I believe that. Yeah. I hold on to that. And I hold on to one day we're going to be back together. I hold on to that. I mean, think about the fundamental parts of our faith. Yeah. All right. I believe that that she's still around in some ways. Mm-hmm. I happen to see her through my grandson. Yeah. Now, I believe those things. Take away those beliefs. Now what? You lose a loved one? I know there's some people who say, well, that was a time, that was a place, and now that's gone. I just can't wrap my mind around it. So for those of us who do believe, it's hard to imagine not having the belief structure that we have, right? And so I don't know how people who don't have faith cope with these major giants that we're talking about. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the farther I get in life, and others may choose to believe other things, and we welcome all we welcome all kinds of beliefs or choices not to believe in certain things. But to me, belief in something greater than yourself is the only choice that makes sense.
It's the only one for me. The only one for you. That's true. That's right. And by the way, that is fundamental to this project, both the book and the podcast, right? Because those people we have interviewed for Victory Groove, we asked the question, how has your faith, just as you asked me, how has your faith helped you? Yeah. All right. And 100%, those people we've talked to, 100% of the time, they go right where we are right now. Yeah. That's helped. Yeah. Right now, I'm just really pleased to be able to capture that. And that was the hardest part. I see it, I feel it, but I had to somehow package it and communicate it. Yeah. And that's what this is. I'm communicating something that we believe in. And it's in that book, it's in the podcast. We believe it. But how do I make people see it? Right. Understand it. Yeah. And that's what I'm attempting to do here.
That is the challenge. Now, I've been fortunate in this process to get connected with your friend, Sherry Carroll.
Yeah.
And Sherry asked a great question in the podcast, in the process, of prepping for Victory Groove. Yeah. It's a question in two parts. So the first part is, what scares you the most right now?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Sherry asking that. So Sherry was a classmate too, by the way. We're both classmates too, both journalism majors. So it's really good that my friend has joined us on this project. It really is. And that's a very good question. It is. Early on in my process, there were lots of things that scared me. lots of things. Anxiety, as you well know, right now, if you Google it, you'll see that anxiety is one of the toughest things that people are facing right now.
Yeah.
And is widely prevalent, coming from COVID. That's right. Coming from COVID, COVID produced a lot of anxiety, the fear of unknown, and people are still in that space, right? And now we have all these variants that are coming along, and people are still in that place where I had someone that told me just recently, this return to work thing. I had a CEO tell me that he has an employee who still hasn't left her house since the beginning of COVID, has not left her home.
My goodness.
And they're trying to get the employees to return to work, and they had to do baby steps. It's like, okay, one of the supervisors called and said, first, we want you to go outside the door, leave your home, and go to your car. She leaves, closes the door, walks to her car, and panics and runs back in. Right. I mean, there are people anxiety is so prevalent now. I had a lot of anxiety when I was starting out. I just told you, I had no way of paying for my baby girl.
Yeah.
That was scary. Yeah. How am I going to do that? What am I going to do? No health insurance? And she's due any day now. What am I going to do? I had a lot of anxiety. And I still have some. But one of the things that I've learned is when you take on these giants and you continue to walk by faith, those giants get bigger, but so does your faith. So does your faith. You kind of build, right? You build that level. So it's like, wow, I've got this in front of me now. And you go back and think about it. Well, I had this, and this. I'm still alive.
Yeah.
I'm still moving forward. So this thing that looks scary, whatever that thing is, I believe I have the tools to get past it. Now, that's the one. So when you ask the question, what scares me the most, there are things that pop up. There's still a lot of uncertainty that goes on. But I just believe I have the tools now, and I have the experience now to say, this is going to be kind of like those 100 others that came my way that built over time.
Yeah. The second part of the question is, what brings you the most joy right now?
Oh, there's no question about it, is watching our future. Yeah. Watching our future. I'll give you a couple of examples. I was sharing it with our family this past weekend. We drove to Houston to visit with one of our daughters and her family. And so, true story. Let me give you this. This is really interesting to me. So I'm watching my grandkids and I'm thinking about our future. All right. There's some people who will look at what's going on in our world and they'll say, that's it, man. It's just, it's just a matter of time. But I'm looking at my grandchildren. Let me share with you a couple of examples of two really telling things. Let me ask you a question. You've read children's books, right? You've got a daughter. You're probably reading books to her now. All right. Have you heard of Dr. Seuss?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce his name?
Seuss.
Yep. I grew up my whole life thinking that that's how we would pronounce that man's name, Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
Right. Just recently, 3 weeks ago, I went to go visit our son and his family. And I've got my youngest grandchild is 6 years old. His name is Ezra.
Okay.
And so my daughter-in-law wanted me to read a book. I love reading books to my grandkids. And so, but I have fun with it. All right. We have a whole experience. I use different voices.
I'm right there with you.
All right. So my grandson Ezra picked a Dr. Seuss book. Yeah. And I was like, oh, you want to read Dr. Seuss? He said, it's Seuss.
Oh.
6 years old. He said, it's Seuss. I said, come on, man. It's Seuss. All my life, I've called it Dr. Seuss. I asked a lot of people, it's Seuss. I actually Googled it. Check it out. It's Dr. Seuss.
Okay, Dr. Seuss. All right.
I learned that from a 6-year-old.
I learned it today on our podcast.
Okay. I've got a granddaughter who loves dogs. Oh my gosh, she's such a dog lover. I got a new dog because she loves dogs so much. And I've had dogs all my life, but this one is really special because my granddaughter picked him out. All right. But here we are. When you look at dogs' lives, all right, what is the number that comes along with human years.
Seven.
7. We've always thought that.
Yeah.
I've said it forever.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Dog years.
Yeah. That's not true. I learned it from an 11-year-old. It varies. Look it up.
Okay.
It varies. Based on the breed. It makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
I'm learning from my grandkids, stuff that we've taken for granted. I'm learning from them. That gives me joy.
I never thought about it, but that's true. Some dogs live to be 20 years old.
Yeah.
20 years old. That does 140, I guess. That's not, the conversion doesn't work.
Some dogs, when you just look it up, I didn't mean to bring us to this point, but I'm learning from my grandkids. That's the theme right now.
Yeah.
But this will both of them really fascinate me because we have said things and thought things forever, and we believe that those things are true.
Yeah.
All right. And I've got grandkids, 6-year-old grandson, an 11-year-old granddaughter who taught me something that I've been taking for granted forever.
Okay.
All right. And so with the dog thing, I'll just close that out. So there's some breeds that first year is not 7, it's 12.
Oh, okay.
Right. Go look it up. All right. What brings me the most joy is that I'm paying attention to my grandchildren. I got 10 of them, so I got a big sample. And I'm listening to each one of them. I got one who's an incredible musician. But Fern and I, we're both musicians. We love music.
Of course.
All right. And we were wondering, out of the 10, are we going to have someone who's going to appreciate and love music as much as we do? Well, we have a couple, but we have one in particular who's really challenging. My namesake, Elijah, is his name. So I visited him. And so Elijah's writing music. He's using Ableton Live.
Okay.
And he's writing music. All right. He's learning to play the piano. He's pretty good at it, pretty proficient. He just got a new baby grand that was given to him just a couple of weeks ago. Huh. And now he's learning the stand-up bass. And so he's just learning music.
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And I'm loving that. And so those are the things that bring me the most joy, is watching our future by watching our grandkids grow and learn.
Beautiful. How do you see this all unfolding?
Yeah. That's a great question. So, I'm still a faculty member. I love to teach and write. All right. So I gave up the deanship, the administrative part, but I've kind of gone back to my first love. I love to write and I love to teach. All right. So I'm doing that. I'm on a couple of boards. I've got those kinds of things going on, but I put myself in a position, Ben, to say, okay, Lord, where do you want me to go next? Right. And so I'll give you a good example of this. And my brother-in-law and I, 2.5 years ago, we started talking about, and this was before I learned of Zoom, by the way. So this was pre-COVID.
Okay.
Right? But, I was given this, I was led to put together a small group that we would meet virtually once a week. And we would just talk about our week and we would pray for each other. All right. And it started with 5 of us. It was my brother-in-law, myself, my son, and 2 of my nephews.
Okay.
All right. Just 5 of us. And so that's what we were doing. So we just meet. We were using Blue Jeans, a different platform. We didn't know about Zoom. And we were meeting and we were just kind of talking about our week and praying for each other. That's all that was. Okay. And then, it was amazing because all of a sudden we started thinking about other people who may want to join us. And we just get together and talk about our week and pray for each other. Right. Well, along came a guy by the name of Al Bell. You just have to look him up. Right. Al Bell, we met when I was a dean at the Walton College of Business in Arkansas.
You might have mentioned him on your previous appearance on the MasterCast.
He's pretty incredible. Yeah. He's got an incredible story, talking about facing a giant and still moving strongly. But Al Bell joined us, and the first thing he asked me, he says, what's the vision for this? And named it 5-fold leaders based on the 5-fold spiritual gifts in Ephesians, right? So you've got the apostles, the prophets, the shepherds, teachers, right? Evangelists.
And that comes up early in the book.
It does, yeah. And so I was telling him about when I looked at the 5 of us and how we actually take a test. There are tests out there you can take to figure out your spiritual gifts. I have 2. I'm an apostle and I'm a teacher. An apostle, if you go back and you look into it a little bit and you think about apostles are kind of like entrepreneurs. We start things, we start stuff, right? Yeah. That's what apostles do, right? I have an expert in my set of friends who actually gave me a lot of understanding about what that means to be an apostle.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an entrepreneurial thing. Just think of it that way. And then the teacher, that didn't surprise me. I love to teach. I remember, well, I won't go there. I remember when I realized I was a teacher. I was 12 years old when I realized I'm a teacher. But anyway, that was one of those moments. But back to this. And so we started this thing, and it was really informal. But when Al Bell asked me, what's your vision for it?
Yeah.
And I gave him what just came off the top of my mind, came out of my heart. And I wanted him to be a guest speaker. That's all. He said, I don't want to be a guest. I want to be part of it.
Yeah.
He's in his 80s. All right. And I don't know if the audience has ever heard of I'll Take You There by the Staple Singers. Beautiful song. It was released in the 70s. Look it up. I'll Take You There by the Staple Singers. He's the man that wrote the song.
Yeah.
He became president and co-owner of Stax Records in Memphis, Tennessee back in the day.
Okay.
Anyway, he's now part of our group. And from that, we brought in some other dear friends, and then we formed a nonprofit. So we actually have a nonprofit now. And what we're doing is it's not only just us meeting, we're now reaching out to the youth.
Right. And this is around fivefold leaders.
It's fivefold leaders, which is another thing
right.
that, I've kind of moved into now.
Right.
And it's pretty amazing. So, for example, we met yesterday.
Okay.
So we meet now every other Sunday at 4.
Okay.
A group of us will join in. We moved over to Zoom now.
Yeah.
A group of us will join in. And we're talking about some really big topics. We talked about forgiveness yesterday. In fact, it was 2 parts. We did it 2 weeks before. And when you think about that, and you've seen it in the social media, I'm putting that stuff out too, right? And I call those giants, the giants of, in this case, the giant of forgiveness.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how big of a deal that is. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
I've gotten emails from people, friends and associates. We're discussing it. When someone harms you, especially if it's intentional, how do you forgive that person?
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for a lot of people. We are discussing those kinds of things. I'm doing it in the social media. I'm looking up these giants. I'm sending that stuff out. All right. That's all part of this whole package, this whole idea of I've got to be able to communicate what we know. Right. And so we talked about it and went into some level of depth that was just mind-boggling when we got there. And the answer is we must forgive no matter what.
No doubt.
No matter how much that hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to.
Well, it's poisonous to us.
Yeah.
If we keep hold of it. And the other person doesn't necessarily, they're not the ones who are suffering long-term because of it.
For their health benefits,
right.
You're right. There are health benefits when you forgive. There are spiritual benefits when you forgive. There are all kinds of benefits of doing it.
Yeah.
But so many people struggle in this area.
That's true. That's true.
And it kind of festers over a period of time. And all of a sudden people are having all kinds of high cholesterol and all kinds of, there are medical studies on this, in this very area, on this subject.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so we talk about those kinds of things. So.
I love it. So for our listeners, you can, this is the book, Run Toward Your Goliaths, and listen to the Victory Groove podcast with Dr. Jones. As I said, we're really fortunate to be a part of that project and looking forward to seeing how it all goes. But in the meantime, Eli, thank you so much for joining us.
You're
today.
welcome.
We really appreciate having you on the show for the second time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for making time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to our discussion with Dr. Eli Jones. Our first takeaway for today is the idea that giants grow as you go through life. I hadn't really considered this explicitly, but it's true. What this means is that if you're still struggling with something, even at an advanced age, it's important to take heart and realize that the things that threaten us later in life are usually bigger, more existential than the things that threaten us in early life. Our second takeaway today was the idea of processing immense loss. Dr. Jones mentioned that after the loss of his daughter, people came out of the woodwork, some he didn't even know, to help him cope with this loss. The call from Lowry Mays. The point is that even at a top 25 business school, the human element has to come first. Business serves life, not the other way around. Our third takeaway is comfort with not knowing. being okay with wandering, being okay with being lost. This is something I am not good at. And for me, the most obvious manifestation has been in entrepreneurship. Early stage entrepreneurship always comes with a lot of chaos before there are systems in place, before we're sure of the market, so forth and so on. For a person like me who loves stability, certainty, and routine, this is a problem. We have to test ourselves. We have to run toward what scares us. I'm doing my best to do that. I don't always do it well, but I won't stop pushing. And now, a quote from Naval Ravikant. Reality is neutral. Our reactions reflect back and create our world. Judge and feel separate and lonely. Anger and lose peace of mind. Cling and live in anxiety. Fantasize and miss the present. Desire and suffer until you have it. Heaven and hell are right here, right now. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching. We appreciate your support. Drop us a like below and feel free to leave a comment if you wish. We appreciate positivity and constructive feedback. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes and bonus content. You can also take us on the road using your favorite podcast listening app. We have those linked below. If you'd like to know more about Mays Business School or our guests, visit mays.tamu.edu/podcasts. Talk with you soon.